Hello, in today's video I review this. This is the P140 from Majohn or Moonman, depending on where you look. This is a really interesting pen. It has a really great number 8 size nib, the Sun nib, similar to the P139 nib. So I'm going to talk about the parts and features, all that kind of stuff today, do a writing sample and give my thoughts. Please like and subscribe and hit the notifications button. Also, please consider joining the membership part of my channel, which I call the Stationery Drawer. For a small monthly fee, you'll get priority comments, you'll get members only content, early access to my videos, and once the community's grown a bit, I'll start doing some member only Q&As. But in the meantime, let's look at this really interesting pen from one of the brands on the Chinese market that's making some real waves. Well, here is the Majohn P140. It is a big pen. It's a pen I really find very comfortable in the hand, and today we're going to talk about parts and features and do a writing sample and all that. One thing I will say at the start is that there's been a lot of talk about this pen resembling the Montblanc 149, and it is very similar in terms of dimensions, but it's also very similar in terms of a range of other pens. The Asvine V800 is a very similar sort of size and, had some similar features and things like that. I think the clip is very similar to a Montblanc sort of style clip, and obviously the dimensions are very similar as well. There is only so much you can do with a pen of this sort of shape. And Montblanc wasn't the first one to do it either. There have been many other pens that had that sort of design over the years. So this is just another in that family. So let's talk about parts and features of this one, do a writing sample, pros and cons and all that kind of stuff. Okay, starting at the top of the pen, we get a nice acrylic dome there. It's very nicely done. The Moonman or Majohn do very good work with their clear acrylics. Then we've got this clip, which is gold colored, which is in the top of that dome there. You can see the threads for all of that. It's a transparent cap, which sort of swells slightly. We get one gold colored band and then a thicker gold colored band with an interesting sort of stamped pattern on it. This will step down onto the barrel. The barrel continues and then tapers to another gold colored ring and then the piston turning knob. And yes, this is a piston filling pen. So this is the piston mechanism. I won't operate it obviously because it is filled with ink, but basically you dip this in a bottle of ink, you turn the knob, the piston runs up and down and draws ink up into the pen. It's a very straightforward filling system. Basically, it turns the entire pen into a converter, that kind of setup. And there's a bunch of videos, including many on my channel, that discuss how that is done. So one thing I'll just quickly note here is that in the first part of that video, the nib was on the other way around in this. You can get it to line up perfectly underneath the clip like that. There's just a couple of starts on those threads. Speaking of those threads, it is a twist cap and it comes off in 2 turns, which is not an insignificant amount of turns, but it's on the top end of what I find, comfortable for this sort of pen. This isn't a quick draw, like pocket pen. This is a pen that is substantial and, will be used at your desk and things like that. Probably more than, just sort of like jotting a phone number down in your diary. There's the threads, which are nice and smooth. It's a relatively short section with a little flare on it, but it's a nice sort of girth. And then that number 8 Sun nib from Majohn there, which is really great. It's got engraved with the sun and then Majohn, and then I think it says Expedition and then F. It's a beautiful nib to write with, and it's got a great feed and all that kind of stuff. It's just a wonderful pen. Like, it's a substantial size in the hand, it feels good, it's comfortable, and it writes very, very well. There are some pens that have number 8 size nibs that I don't find particularly comfortable. This is one where it is comfortable. Same as the Asvine V800 again, where it's just sort of the right sort of size for that nib in your hand. I still personally prefer a number 6 size nib, but this is one of the number 8 size nibs that I can really use very comfortably. Now, it does post, and it posts relatively securely, but it does make it quite a large pen. So if you like to post your pens, you absolutely can. I don't feel the need to. I find it very comfortable in my hand without having to post. The balance of the pen is interesting in this format because there's a lot of weight at the back there in that brass piston mechanism. But because the pen sits into your hand, you don't feel it back weighted at all. And then because that balance still sits there when it's posted, it's still relatively balanced, even though it's quite long when you do post it. And that's the basics of this pen. This is an affordable pen. It's not super expensive. I'll come back to price in a little bit. But you get a lot of pen for your money. And I've not had a problem. From the moment I inked this, it was beautiful in my hand and it wrote beautifully. And as did the P139, which is the other pen from Majohn that uses that same nib. I'm very impressed. They're doing some good things. I've been a bit of a... I haven't always been a fan of Moonman or Majohn, particularly the early stuff. I found the copying of other pen models to be just a little bit too much. And I found, sort of the nibs to underperform. But these number 8 Sun nibs are really, really fantastic. Okay, for the size comparison today, I have it alongside the standard Lamy Safari. You can see it's a much bigger pen. And then the Asvine V800, which is another pen that uses a number 8 size nib from a Chinese manufacturer. You can see there's proportional things, in common. Both are considered to be sort of, in honor of the Mont Blanc 149, but you can see they're both a little bit different, as they are different to the Mont Blanc. But people are saying they're inspired by it. You can see why. But yeah, they're both big pens, both around the same length and much longer than the Lamy Safari in this format. Uncapped, they're still longer than the Lamy Safari, but the gap has closed. And I would say that the V800 is just a little bit longer, unposted, than the Moonman P140. And then posted, the Asvine comes in longer again. They're all good length pens when they're posted. Even the Lamy Safari is quite a long pen. But these are big pens. They both have good girth, much sort of thicker sections there, and nice long lengths in the hand. So what are the specific dimensions of the Majohn P140? Well, it's 149 millimeters when it is capped. It's 133 when it is uncapped. So it's, once again, as I said, a good length. And it's 172 when it's posted, making it a nice sort of size. Around the middle of the section is around the 12.5 millimeter mark. And it's about 17 millimeters around the widest point on the cap. So a good girthy sort of sized pen. The pen weighs about 36 grams, 25 in the body and 11 in the cap. But as I said earlier, the balance stays nicely in that webbing of your hand, given the fact that, a lot of that weight is in the brass mechanism. Being a piston filler and being a larger pen, obviously it's going to have a good capacity, and that's about 1.7, just over 1.7 milliliters of ink. So not the biggest capacity. We see pens with easily sort of 4 milliliter capacities and things like that out on the market now. Vac fillers and, some bulk fillers and things like that. So 1.7, which is around about 3 cartridges worth of ink, it's got a good capacity on it, but it's not going to compete with some of those bulk filling pens. Okay, let's do a writing sample with the Majohn P140 fountain pen here. There are some reports that these come with ebonite feeds. I couldn't find that on this particular listing. I purchased this pen, I think, from AliExpress, so I'm not sure, but some are listed with ebonite feed and some don't say. So I'll leave that up to your discretion. This has a number 8 steel nib. This is a fine. And the ink in this today is an Australian ink. It is Robert Oster Australian Shiraz. Robert Oster, I think I said this in my what I'm writing with video. Robert Oster comes from a wine region of Australia. And so a lot of his inks have like a theme that is sort of related to the area, his area. And so wine does feature quite heavily. Let's do some writing. Okay, it's smooth. Like, I'm not upset about it, but just some of those cross strokes tend to have a little more feedback on them. It's not sharp, just a little bit more feedback. Reverse writing, it's very dry, very fine, but as you can see, you can get a few words out without any issue. Wetness, it's actually pretty good. Like, I'm not complaining about that at all. For a fine nib, that's writing pretty wet. Flex, you can get a little bit out at these nibs. Gently does it, slowly does it, but you can see without any pressure through to pressure, you can get a little bit of line variation. That's more than just putting more ink on the page. Like, that is actually genuine line variation, but not a soft nib. You can just squeeze a little bit out if you want to. Let's do some quick writing. Like, I have no issues with that, as I said. It keeps up really, really well. These nibs perform really, really nicely. They are, wet. They write, true to their line width. They're a very, very good nib. And on a pen that is built this well, like, it feels sturdy. Like, the acrylic feels robust. The brass mechanism gives it a nice sort of comforting weight. So I think this is one of those pens where it does perform beautifully, and especially at its price point. So how much does this pen cost? Well, depending on where you get it, in Australian, because I'm in Australia, so that's what I see, 45 to 85 Australian dollars. So $45 on places like AliExpress, $85 on places like Amazon. So it will depend on the seller and all of those kinds of things. As I said, some list it as an ebonite feed, some don't. Make sure you get one with the brass filling system. Some of the other, I think it's a P141, which looks very, very similar, is not the same pen. Not the same pen, just in a different color material. Different pen. Will perform differently. Feels like rubbish in your hands in comparison. I didn't even bother keeping the 141. I got the 140 and the 141 together. 141's gone already. 140, lovely pen. So what are the pros and cons? Well, cons. Couple of basic things. Firstly, yes, the design has some derivative features from brands like Montblanc, like that clip, like feels like a Montblanc clip. The other issue I have, I don't consider that little scratchiness on the nib that much of an issue, but the only other issue I have is that there is some cross-threading occasionally on the, of course it's not going to do it while I'm videoing, is it? Of course, no, never. But on these threads, just occasionally the threads sort of catch. Of course, it's not going to happen now. That's okay. You just have to sort of take my word for it. But they catch it. It's easy just to sort of spin it back on itself and then let it run through. And as I said, depending on which way you thread it, the nib will be upright way or upside down in comparison to the clip. So what are the pros? Okay, firstly, just going to say price is great. Even at $85, I think this is a really good value pen. I like the size. It feels good and it feels very comfortable in my hand. It is a classic design. There's nothing outrageous. Oh, just sort of did that cross-threading thing then. There's nothing outrageous about the design. Nothing that's going to be, too ostentatious or anything. Like, yes, the gold trim and that big center band are, they're definitely there. But I don't think it's necessarily going to be too much for most people. It's not going to be to everyone's taste. No pen is going to be to everyone's taste. But I think this is a pretty safe one. I like the way the nib writes. It's relatively smooth, it's wet, all that kind of stuff. I really like the ink capacity of the pen, but I think for me the biggest pro, other than the those sun nibs being good, is this filling mechanism. It's a really sturdy mechanism. The brass gives it nice weight and heft. And as I said, it's a comforting weight in your hand. It feels very nice to write with this pen. It doesn't feel flimsy. It doesn't feel like it's going to fly away in your hand. This pen feels great to write with. For me, that's what it's all about. Does the pen write? Does it write well? Does it feel good? Yes, yes, and yes. So they've got a winner here, in my opinion. So that was the P140 from Majohn. Good pen, solid pen, good size. Yes, quite derivative in terms of design from a range of other pens, but once again, it's one of those things, what can you do? It's a pen with rounded ends, but there are a few details that make it very similar. But thank you for watching. As I said at the start, please like and subscribe and consider joining the membership part of this channel. In the meantime, enjoy your pens, enjoy writing, and I'll talk to you soon.